The morning sky over New Geneva Station crackled with energy as the massive Draconian warship descended through the clouds. Captain Sarah Chan watched from the observation deck as the ship's dark hull blocked out the sun, casting shadows across the human colony that stretched for kilometers below. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Torres beside her. "It's even bigger than the reports said." The ship was a work of art and terror combined. Its hull resembled the scales of some ancient beast, each plate the size of a building. Weapon ports lined its sides like glowing eyes, and energy fields rippled around it like heat waves. This was the flagship of the Draconian Empire, and aboard it was their most feared representative, Ambassador Kithra the Destroyer. Sarah had read every file, every report about the being they were about to meet. Kithra belonged to a species that humans had dubbed dragons for obvious reasons. Standing 12 feet tall, with armored scales that could deflect plasma fire, razor-sharp claws that could tear through steel, and a bite that could crush a hovercar, Kithra had personally conquered 17 star systems for the Draconian Empire. The ambassador's reputation for violence was so legendary that entire civilizations had surrendered rather than face them in battle. And now this creature was coming to determine if humanity deserved to exist as an independent species. "Captain," came the voice of Communications Officer Park over the comm system. "The Draconian ship is requesting permission to land. They want to use landing Bay 7. "Granted," Sarah replied, though her mouth felt dry. "Clear all personnel from that section, except essential crew. And make sure the diplomatic team is ready." The truth was that Sarah felt anything but ready. Humanity had only made contact with the galactic community 6 months ago, when their deep space exploration vessel had stumbled across a Draconian patrol. The dragons ruled this section of the galaxy with absolute authority, and they had little patience for new species that might disrupt their carefully maintained order. The humans had been given exactly one chance to prove they could integrate peacefully into Draconian society. If they failed, Earth and all its colonies would be conquered, and its people made into servants. The weight of her entire species' future pressed down on Sarah's shoulders like a physical thing. "The ship is landing now," Torres reported, his voice tight with tension. Through the transparent aluminum windows, Sarah could see the Draconian vessel settling onto the landing platform with surprising grace for something so massive. Steam hissed from its engines as they powered down, and the energy fields around it faded to a dull glow. "Captain," came another voice over the comm. "This is Dr. Martinez in the diplomatic section. We have a problem." Sarah's heart sank. "What kind of problem, Doctor?" "Ambassador Williams came down with Rigelian flu this morning. High fever, can't even stand up. And Dr. Peterson was exposed, so he's in quarantine. Ma'am, I'm the only trained diplomat we have left, and honestly, I specialize in trade negotiations, not first contact with potentially hostile species." Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath. This was exactly what they didn't need. The Draconians valued strength and confidence above all else. Sending a nervous trade negotiator to meet their most feared warrior would be seen as an insult. "What about the cultural attaché team?" she asked. "The Hendersons are good people, but they're anthropologists, not diplomats. They study cultures. They don't negotiate with them." Sarah was quiet for a moment, thinking rapidly. The Hendersons were indeed good people. Dr. Robert Henderson was one of the galaxy's leading experts on interspecies communication, and his wife, Dr. Lisa Henderson, specialized in xenobiology. They had been invaluable in preparing for this meeting, but they also had their 8-year-old son Tommy with them. "Captain," came another voice over the comm, this time from landing Bay 7. "The Draconian ship's hatch is opening." Sarah made her decision. "Dr. Martinez, you're our lead diplomat whether you like it or not. Take the Hendersons with you as cultural advisors. Brief them on the way down. And Doctor." "Yes, Captain. Remember that the Draconians respect directness and honesty above all else. Don't try to be clever or sneaky. Just tell them who we are and what we want." "Understood." Martinez out. Sarah turned back to the window and watched as a ramp extended from the Draconian ship. What emerged first made her breath catch in her throat. Ambassador Kithra was even more impressive in person than in the holographic records. The dragon scales were a deep emerald green that seemed to shift and shimmer in the light. Powerful muscles rippled under that armored hide as Kithra moved down the ramp with predatory grace. The ambassador's head was elongated and reptilian, with intelligent golden eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Those eyes, Sarah realized, held an ancient wisdom and a barely contained violence that made her want to step back from the window. Behind Kithra came a small retinue of other Draconians, each impressive in their own right, but clearly subordinate to their leader. They wore ceremonial armor that gleamed like liquid metal, and each carried weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. Torres, Sarah said quietly, make sure all our people know to stay calm and respectful. No sudden movements, no loud noises. And for the love of all that's holy, make sure nobody does anything stupid. The diplomatic team was waiting in the landing bay when the Draconians arrived. Dr. Martinez stood at the front, flanked by the Henderson family. Sarah could see them clearly through the security cameras, and she noticed that young Tommy Henderson was staring at the dragons with wide-eyed fascination rather than fear. Ambassador Kithra approached the human delegation with slow, measured steps. When the dragons spoke, their voice was a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate through the deck plating. I am Ambassador Kithra of the Draconian Empire. I come to evaluate whether your species possesses the wisdom and strength necessary for independence, or whether you require the guidance of conquest. Dr. Martinez stepped forward, and Sarah was proud to see that the man's voice was steady despite the obvious fear in his eyes. Welcome to New Geneva Station, Ambassador. I am Dr. Carlos Martinez, representing the United Earth Government. These are Dr. Robert and Lisa Henderson, our cultural specialists. Kithra's golden eyes fixed on Martinez with an intensity that made the doctor visibly sweat. You are afraid. The dragon observed matter-of-factly. Yes, Martinez replied after a moment's hesitation. Any reasonable being would be afraid when meeting someone of your reputation and power. But fear doesn't prevent us from doing what's necessary. Sarah felt a surge of pride. That was exactly the right response, acknowledging the dragon's power while showing human courage. Kithra's head tilted slightly, and Sarah thought she detected something like approval in the gesture. Honesty. Good. Fear is wisdom when facing a superior force. Courage in spite of that fear is strength. The dragon's gaze shifted to the Hendersons, and Sarah saw Kithra's eyes narrow slightly as they focused on young Tommy. The boy was still staring at the ambassador with obvious fascination, completely unafraid. You bring a youngling to a diplomatic meeting? Kithra's tone held a note of disapproval. Is this how humans show respect? Dr. Robert Henderson stepped forward. Ambassador, our son Tommy is here because we believe children represent the future of any species. We wanted you to see not just who we are now, but who we hope to become. It was a diplomatic answer, but Sarah could tell that Kithra wasn't entirely satisfied with it. The dragon continued to stare at Tommy with those ancient, predatory eyes. Child, Kithra said directly to Tommy, are you not afraid of me? Tommy looked up at the towering dragon with complete innocence. Should I be? You're really pretty. An audible gasp went up from the human delegation. Even some of the Draconian retinue seemed taken aback. No one, especially not a child, had ever called Ambassador Kithra pretty. But instead of rage, something strange flickered across the dragon's features. Kithra leaned down slightly, bringing their massive head closer to Tommy's level. Pretty, the ambassador repeated, and there was an almost amused quality to the deep voice. Yeah, Tommy said enthusiastically. Your scales are all shiny, and they change colors when you move. And your eyes are like golden coins. I wish I had scales like that. Sarah watched in amazement as Ambassador Kithra, the being who had personally destroyed entire civilizations, seemed genuinely taken aback by a child's innocent compliment. You have no fear, Kithara observed, and now there was definite curiosity in the dragon's tone. My mom and Dad taught me that different doesn't mean scary, Tommy replied with the straightforward honesty that only children possess. You look different from us, but that just makes you interesting, not scary. For a long moment, the landing bay was completely silent except for the hum of the station's life support systems. Sarah found herself holding her breath as she watched the most dangerous being in the known galaxy contemplate the words of an 8-year-old human boy. Finally, Kithara straightened to their full height. Your species shows promise, the ambassador said to Dr. Martinez. But words are easily spoken. The true measure of a people is revealed through their actions under pressure. What kind of test did you have in mind? Martinez asked carefully. Kithara's lips pulled back in what might have been a smile, revealing teeth like ivory daggers. Tomorrow, we begin the evaluation. Your people will be given challenges that will test not just your capabilities, but your character. Some of these tests may be dangerous. Sarah felt her heart sink. She had hoped that the initial meeting would go smoothly enough to avoid any dangerous trials, but it seemed that wasn't to be. We understand, Martinez replied. Humanity is ready to prove itself. We shall see, Kithara said. The dragon's gaze shifted back to Tommy one more time. Child, you will remain close during the trials. I find your perspective illuminating. Tommy beamed up at the dragon. Cool. Are we going to be friends? Even Kithara seemed at a loss for words at that question. After a moment, the dragon simply said, That remains to be seen, youngling. As the Draconian delegation departed to their assigned quarters, Sarah finally allowed herself to breathe normally again. The first meeting had gone better than she had dared hope, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the real challenges were just beginning. Captain, came Dr. Martinez's voice over the comm. Initial contact is complete. The ambassador seems intrigued by us. Good work, Doctor. Get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. As night fell over New Geneva Station, Sarah stood alone on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, home to billions of people who were counting on them to secure humanity's future among the stars. The weight of that responsibility was almost crushing, but there was also hope. Tommy Henderson's innocent interaction with Ambassador Kithara had shown something that all their diplomatic training and cultural research had missed. Sometimes the most complex problems had the simplest solutions. Sometimes all it took was one person seeing another not as a threat or an obstacle, but simply as another living being worthy of friendship. Sarah just hoped that would be enough when the real test began tomorrow. Down in their guest quarters, the Henderson family was having their own discussion about the day's events. Tommy, Dr. Lisa Henderson said gently, You know that Ambassador Kithara is a very important and very dangerous person, right? Tommy nodded seriously. Dad explained about the dragons and how they're really strong and they rule lots of planets. But Kithara doesn't seem mean, just lonely. His parents exchanged glances. Lonely? Dr. Robert asked. Yeah, when I said they were pretty, they looked surprised. Like nobody ever said nice things to them before. That would make me sad if I was them. Dr. Lisa knelt down to her son's level. Tommy, tomorrow there are going to be tests. Some of them might be scary or dangerous. I need you to promise me that you'll stay close to us and do exactly what we say, okay? I promise, Mom. But I don't think Kithara will let anything really bad happen to us. I think they like us. His parents hoped he was right, but they knew that the trials ahead would test more than just Tommy's innocent faith in the goodness of others. They would test everything that made humanity human. And somewhere in the station's guest quarters, Ambassador Kithara stood alone by a window, looking out at the same stars that Captain Shen was watching. The dragon's ancient mind was troubled by thoughts that they had not experienced in centuries. The human child had called them pretty. Not fearsome, not terrible, not any of the dozen other words that beings usually use to describe the infamous Kithara, the Destroyer. Pretty. It was a simple word, innocently given, but it had awakened something in the dragon's consciousness that had been dormant for so long that Kithara had forgotten it existed. For just a moment, when looking into those trusting young eyes, The ambassador had remembered what it felt like to be seen as a being rather than a weapon. Tomorrow would bring the trials, and with them the ultimate test of whether humanity deserved to remain free. But tonight, for the first time in longer than Kithra could remember, the galaxy's most feared dragon fell asleep, thinking not of conquest or destruction, but of golden coins and shimmering scales, and of a small voice saying that different didn't have to mean scary. The trials would indeed test humanity's character and capabilities. But they would also test something else, whether one child's innocent heart could bridge the gap between species that have been built by centuries of fear and violence. The answer to that question would determine not just humanity's fate, but perhaps the future of the entire galaxy. The next morning brought an atmosphere of tense anticipation to New Geneva Station. Captain Sarah Chun had barely slept, spending most of the night reviewing contingency plans and emergency protocols. She knew that today would likely determine whether humanity would remain free or become subjects of the Draconian Empire. In the main conference room, Ambassador Kithara stood before a holographic display showing various sections of the station. The dragon's massive form seemed to fill the entire space, making even the large room feel cramped. Around the conference table sat the human delegation, Dr. Martinez, the Henderson family, and several other station officials. The trials will test 3 fundamental aspects of your species, Kithara announced in that deep, rumbling voice: intelligence, courage, and compassion. Each trial builds upon the last, and failure at any stage results in immediate conquest of your worlds. Tommy Henderson sat between his parents, swinging his legs from the adult-sized chair. He was listening intently, though Sarah noticed he seemed more excited than afraid. The boy's fearless fascination with Ambassador Kithara continued to amaze everyone present. The first trial begins immediately, Kithara continued. Your people will be presented with a technical challenge that has defeated 17 other species. You have 4 hours to solve it, using only the resources available on this station. The holographic display shifted to show a complex 3-dimensional puzzle. It looked like a sphere made of interlocking geometric shapes, each glowing with different colored energy patterns. Mathematical equations in draconian script floated around it like satellites. Dr. Robert Henderson leaned forward, his anthropologist mind immediately engaged. Is this a technology test? A mathematical proof? It is both, and neither, Kithara replied cryptically. The challenge is to understand the true nature of what you see before you. Some species attempted to solve it through pure mathematical analysis. Others tried to dismantle it physically. All failed because they made the same fundamental error. Which was? Dr. Martinez asked. Kithara's golden eyes glittered with something that might have been amusement. They assumed it was a puzzle to be solved rather than a truth to be understood. Sarah watched from the observation deck as teams of engineers, scientists, and mathematicians gathered in the station's main laboratory. They had some of the brightest minds humanity had to offer, but she could see the confusion and growing frustration on their faces as they studied the holographic construct. "Mom," Tommy whispered to Dr. Lisa Henderson, "can I go look at the pretty puzzle too?" His mother was about to say no, but Ambassador Kithara's head turned toward them with startling speed. Those predatory senses apparently extended to hearing as well as sight. "You find it pretty, youngling?" Kithara asked. Tommy nodded enthusiastically. All those colors swirling around like a rainbow ball. And the way the shapes move, it's like they're dancing together. The dragon's eyes narrowed with interest. Dancing? Yeah, see how they spin and twist? Like they're happy to be together. The blue ones like to be next to the green ones, and the red ones always follow the yellow ones around the circle. Sarah felt her heart start to race. While the scientists below were running complex mathematical models and trying to physically manipulate the holographic construct, Tommy was simply watching it with a child's unbiased perception. Dr. Robert Henderson caught on immediately. "Tommy, what else do you see when you look at it?" "Well," Tommy said thoughtfully, "it's not really a puzzle at all. It's more like a family. See how all the different pieces take care of each other? The big ones protect the little ones, and the little ones help the big ones move in the right direction. Ambassador Kithara moved closer to the human delegation, and Sarah could see genuine interest in the dragon's expression. Continue, child. The shapes aren't trying to get away from each other, Tommy explained with the simple clarity that only children possess. They want to stay together because that's how they're supposed to be. When they're all connected right, they make something beautiful. A deep rumble came from Kithara's throat, not a growl, but what Sarah realized was actually laughter. In 4 hours, your finest minds have not grasped what this youngling saw in 4 minutes. The construct is not a puzzle to be solved, but a representation of harmony. It demonstrates how different elements can work together not in spite of their differences, but because of them. Sarah felt a surge of hope, but it was quickly tempered by uncertainty. Does that mean we passed the first trial? The intelligence test is complete, Kithara confirmed. Your species shows wisdom in unexpected forms. But intelligence alone is not enough to earn independence. Now comes the test of courage. The scene shifted as Kithara led them through the station corridors to one of the cargo holds. The space had been transformed into something resembling an arena, with obstacles, barriers, and what looked like weapon emplacements around the perimeter. Each of your warriors must demonstrate their courage by facing one of my honor guard in single combat, Kithara announced. Sarah's blood went cold. The Draconian honor guard were elite soldiers, each capable of defeating multiple human opponents without effort. This wasn't a test, it was execution. Ambassador, Dr. Martinez, said carefully, our people are not warriors in the traditional sense. We're scientists, diplomats, engineers. We don't have soldiers aboard this station. Then, send whoever you consider your strongest, Kithara replied without sympathy. Courage is courage, regardless of training. Sarah was about to volunteer herself when Tommy Henderson stepped forward. I'll do it. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Kithara seemed taken aback. Tommy, no. Dr. Lisa Henderson said firmly, reaching for her son. But Tommy gently moved away from his mother's grasp and looked up at Ambassador Kithara with complete trust. You said we need to show courage, right? I'm not scared. Child, Kithara said, and for the first time since arriving at the station, the dragon's voice held a note of uncertainty. You are barely large enough to reach an adult's waist. My honor guard could accidentally harm you without intending to. But I trust you, Tommy said simply. You wouldn't let anything really bad happen to me. And besides, maybe courage isn't about being the strongest or the best at fighting. Maybe it's about doing what's right even when you're scared. Kithara stared down at the boy for a long moment. Around them, the human adults held their breath, waiting to see how the galaxy's most feared diplomat would respond to an 8-year-old's logic. You're not scared, Kithara observed. Nope. Should I be? Yes, the dragon said honestly. Any rational being would be terrified of facing a draconian warrior in combat. But that's exactly why I should do it, Tommy replied with the kind of simple wisdom that children sometimes possess. If I'm not scared, then it's not really brave, is it? Being brave means doing the right thing when you are scared. Sarah realized that Tommy had just articulated something profound about the nature of courage that many adults never fully grasped. From Kithara's expression, the dragon had reached the same conclusion. You would face my honor guard? Kithara asked. Sure, but I don't think we have to fight. Maybe there's a different way to show courage. Kithara was quiet for a very long time. When the dragon finally spoke, there was something different in that deep voice, a quality Sarah had never heard before. In 800 years of conducting these trials, no species has ever suggested that courage could be demonstrated through nonviolence. They assume that strength and aggression are the same thing. They're not, though, Tommy said matter-of-factly. My dad taught me that the strongest thing you can do is help someone instead of hurting them. That takes way more courage than fighting. Ambassador Kithara slowly lowered themselves until they were closer to Tommy's eye level. Though even crouched down, the dragon still towered over the boy. Those ancient golden eyes studied Tommy with an intensity that made Sarah's breath catch. You speak of helping others. How would you help my honor guard? Tommy thought about this seriously. Well, I don't know them very well yet, but everybody needs something. Maybe they're lonely like you were, or maybe they're worried about their families back home, or maybe they just want someone to think they're cool instead of scary. The boy paused, then brightened with an idea. I know. I could ask them to teach me something. Dad says that teaching someone is one of the best ways to make friends, and everyone likes feeling important and smart. Kithra straightened slowly, and Sarah could see emotions playing across the dragon's alien features that she couldn't begin to interpret. Guard Captain Vex, Kithra called. One of the Draconian honor guards stepped forward. Like Kithra, this dragon was impressive, slightly smaller than the ambassador but still massive by human standards, with dark blue scales that seemed to absorb light. Yes, Ambassador. This human youngling wishes to demonstrate courage by learning from you rather than fighting you. Will you accept this unconventional challenge? Guard Captain Vex looked down at Tommy with obvious confusion. Ambassador, I do not understand. How does teaching constitute a trial of courage? Tommy looked up at the blue-scale dragon with the same fearless curiosity he had shown Kithra. Hi, I'm Tommy. What's your name? I am Guard Captain Vex, the dragon replied hesitantly. That's a really cool name. Can you teach me how to be brave like you? I bet you know lots of brave things. Sarah watched in fascination as the massive warrior dragon seemed completely disarmed by Tommy's innocent directness. Vex looked to Kithra for guidance, but the ambassador simply gestured for them to continue. I suppose I could share some basic principles of courage in combat, Vex said uncertainly. Awesome. Tommy sat down cross-legged on the arena floor, looking up at Vex with rapt attention. Tell me everything. What followed was perhaps the most surreal combat lesson in galactic history. Guard Captain Vex, who had personally conquered 7-star systems, found themselves explaining military tactics and warrior philosophy to an enthusiastic 8-year-old human boy who asked questions like, but what if the enemy just needs a hug? And have you tried talking to them first? Sarah could see that the lesson was affecting Vex as much as Tommy. The dragon's explanations became more thoughtful, less focused on pure violence, and more on protecting others. When Tommy asked why Vex became a warrior, the guard captain actually paused to think about it. I wanted to protect my family, Vex admitted. My world was attacked when I was young. I decided I would become strong enough to keep that from happening to others. So you're not really a fighter, Tommy said with a brilliant smile. You're a protector. That's even better. The simple reframing of Vex's entire identity seemed to hit the dragon like a physical blow. Sarah could see surprise and something like wonder in the warrior's expression. Yes, Vex said slowly, as if realizing it for the first time. I suppose I am a protector. That's so cool. I want to be a protector too when I grow up. Can you teach me how to protect people without hurting other people? Guard Captain Vex was quiet for a long moment, thinking. I have never considered that approach. But perhaps, yes, perhaps courage and protection do not require violence. Perhaps the greatest courage is in choosing mercy when you have the power to destroy. Ambassador Kithra watched this exchange with growing amazement. Vex, in all your years of service, have you ever questioned the assumption that strength must be demonstrated through combat? No, Ambassador, but this youngling makes me think that perhaps we have been limited in our understanding. Tommy bounced to his feet and, to everyone's shock, walked directly up to Guard Captain Vex and held out his small hand. Thanks for teaching me. You're a really good teacher. Vex stared down at the offered hand for a moment, then carefully extended one massive clawed finger. Tommy shook it solemnly, as if they were sealing an important agreement. The trial of courage is complete, Kithra announced, and there was something like awe in the dragon's voice. Your species has demonstrated that true courage lies not in the willingness to fight, but in the wisdom to find alternatives to violence. This is a lesson that the galaxy has forgotten. Sarah felt relief wash over her, but she knew there was still one trial remaining, and Given the pattern, it was likely to be the most challenging yet. The final trial, Kithara, continued. Test compassion. This is where most species fail, because they believe compassion is weakness. Compassion isn't weakness, Tommy said matter-of-factly. It's the hardest thing of all, because it means caring about people even when they're mean to you or different from you. Kithara looked down at the boy with an expression that Sarah was beginning to recognize as genuine respect. You understand compassion, youngling. But understanding and demonstrating are different things. The final trial will test whether your species can show compassion even to those who have been your enemies. The dragon's gaze shifted to encompass all the humans present. Tomorrow, you'll meet a being who has every reason to hate your kind. If you can show true compassion to this individual, then humanity will have proven itself worthy of independence. If you fail, Kithara didn't need to finish the sentence. The consequences of failure were clear. As the delegation dispersed for the evening, Sarah found herself walking beside the Henderson family. Tommy was chattering excitedly about his lesson with Guard Captain Vex, but his parents looked worried. Dr. Henderson, Sarah said quietly, your son has been remarkable throughout this process. He's shown wisdom that many adults lack. That's what worries me, Dr. Lisa Henderson replied. Tomorrow's trial sounds like it could be dangerous, and Tommy's fearlessness might finally get him into trouble he can't talk his way out of. I don't know, Dr. Robert Henderson said thoughtfully. So far, Tommy's approach has been exactly what was needed. Maybe his innocence and natural compassion are our greatest strengths. That night, Sarah stood once again on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. 2 trials down, 1 to go. But she couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow would bring their greatest challenge yet. In their quarters, Tommy Henderson lay in his bed, staring up at the ceiling. His parents thought he was asleep, but his mind was racing with thoughts about dragons and courage and the big test coming tomorrow. He wasn't scared exactly. Ambassador Kithara and Guard Captain Vex had both been really nice once he got to know them. But he could tell that the adults were worried, and that made him think that maybe tomorrow would be different. Still, Tommy had learned something important over the past 2 days. Sometimes the scariest-looking things were actually just lonely or misunderstood. Maybe whoever they met tomorrow would be the same way. Maybe all they needed was a friend. Down in the guest quarters, Ambassador Kithara was having a very different kind of sleepless night. The dragon's ancient mind was wrestling with concepts that challenged everything they had believed about strength, courage, and the nature of civilization itself. In 2 days, a human child had overturned centuries of draconian assumptions about what made a species worthy of independence. Intelligence, they had always believed, was demonstrated through complex problem-solving. Courage through combat prowess. Compassion through submission to superior force. But Tommy Henderson had shown them that intelligence could be as simple as seeing truth without preconceptions. That courage could mean choosing vulnerability over violence. And that compassion. Tomorrow would test whether humanity could extend compassion even to their enemies. It would be the ultimate trial, and Kithara knew that the being they would meet had been chosen specifically because they embodied everything that humans should fear and hate. But perhaps Kithara thought, as sleep finally claimed them, that would make the test all the more meaningful. Perhaps true compassion could only be measured by how it was extended to the undeserving. The final trial would reveal not just humanity's character, but whether the galaxy itself was ready for a new kind of strength, one based not on dominance and fear, but on understanding and connection. Tomorrow would change everything, one way or another. The 3rd day dawned with an ominous feeling that seemed to permeate every corner of New Geneva Station. Captain Sarah Chun could feel the tension in the air as she made her way to the main conference room. Even the usually cheerful maintenance crews worked in subdued silence, as if they sensed that something momentous was about to unfold. When Sarah arrived at the conference room, she found the human delegation already assembled. The Henderson family sat together, with Tommy between his parents as usual. Dr. Martinez looked pale and tired, clearly feeling the weight of responsibility for humanity's future. The other station officials present all wore expressions of barely contained anxiety. Ambassador Kithra stood at the front of the room, but today the dragon was not alone. Beside Kithra was another figure that made Sarah's blood run cold. The being was roughly humanoid in shape, but clearly not human. Its skin was a sickly pale green color, marked with raised scars and what looked like surgical implants. Its eyes were completely black, lacking any visible iris or pupil, and its face was gaunt and angular in a way that suggested chronic pain. Most disturbing of all were its arms. Both had been replaced with crude mechanical prosthetics that sparked and jerked with every movement. Humans, Ambassador Kithra announced. Meet Designation 774, formerly known as Zaktar of the Hegemony. The scarred being stepped forward with an unsteady gait, its mechanical arms whirring softly. When it spoke, its voice was harsh and filled with barely contained hatred. Humans. The very word tastes like poison in my mouth. Sarah felt the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Beside her, she could see the other delegation members shift uncomfortably. But Tommy Henderson, as always, seemed more curious than afraid. The final trial of compassion, Kithra continued, will test whether your species can show mercy and understanding to one who has suffered greatly at human hands. 774, tell them your story. The scarred being's black eyes fixed on the human delegation with undisguised malice. I was a trader once, a simple merchant traveling the space lanes, harming no one, until I encountered human pirates. Sarah's heart sank. She had been afraid of something like this, some past human action that would prejudice the trial against them. These humans, 774 continued, his voice growing more bitter with each word, attacked my ship without provocation. They killed my crew, stole my cargo, and left me floating in space to die slowly. But death would have been kinder than what came next. The being raised its mechanical arms, servos whining. The pirates had damaged my ship's life support. I was slowly dying of radiation poisoning when a Draconian patrol found me. They saved my life, but the radiation had already done its work. My arms had to be amputated, my organs replaced with artificial ones. I am more machine than flesh now, and every day I live in constant pain. Tommy's face had grown serious as he listened to the story, and Sarah could see genuine sadness in the boy's eyes. But she also noticed that he wasn't shrinking away from the scarred being like the other humans were. That's really sad, Tommy said softly. I'm sorry that happened to you. 774's black gaze snapped to the boy, and Sarah saw something flicker in those dark eyes, surprise, perhaps, that anyone would express sympathy for him. Do not mock me with false pity, child, 774 snarled. Your species showed me their true nature. Humans are nothing but violent, greedy parasites who take whatever they want without thought for the suffering they cause. But I'm not mocking you, Tommy replied with that sincere honesty that only children could manage. What happened to you is really, really wrong. Nobody should hurt someone else like that. Dr. Martinez stepped forward. 774, on behalf of all humanity, I want to say that what those pirates did was inexcusable. But surely you understand that the actions of a few criminals don't represent our entire species. The Scar Being's laugh was like broken glass. Do they not? Every human I have encountered since has shown me the same disregard, the same casual cruelty. Your species is a plague upon the galaxy. That's not true, Tommy said, jumping to his feet. His parents reached for him, but he was already walking towards 774. We're not all like that. Most humans are really nice. Stay away from me. 774 stepped back, his mechanical arms jerking spasmodically. I want nothing to do with your kind. But Tommy didn't stop approaching. You're really hurting, aren't you? Not just your body, but your feelings too. Something in a boy's tone made 774 freeze. For a moment, the hatred in his voice was replaced by something else, a raw pain that went far deeper than physical injury. Every day, 774 whispered. Every moment of every day, I am reminded of what your people took from me. My crew, my ship, my body, my future, all destroyed by human greed. Tommy reached 774 and, before anyone could stop him, gently reached out and touched one of the being's mechanical arms. I'm really sorry, Tommy said simply. I wish I could take away all your hurt. 774 stared down at the small human hand resting on his prosthetic arm. For a moment, his entire body seemed to tremble, and Sarah could see internal conflict raging in those black eyes. What? 774 asked, his voice barely a whisper. Why do you care about my pain? I am your enemy. I hate everything about your species. Tommy looked up at the scarred being with those wide, innocent eyes. Because hating hurts you more than it hurts us. And because you didn't want to be mean, those bad people made you this way. But that doesn't mean you have to stay this way forever. Ambassador Kithra watched this exchange with growing amazement. Around the room, Sarah could see the other humans beginning to overcome their initial fear and revulsion. Dr. Lisa Henderson had tears in her eyes, and even the stoic Dr. Martinez looked deeply moved. You don't understand, 774 said, but his voice had lost much of its venom. I have spent years planning my revenge against humanity. I dream of seeing your worlds burn, of making your people suffer as I have suffered. I know, Tommy said sadly, but that won't make you feel better. It'll just make more people hurt like you do. And then they'll want revenge too, and it'll just go on and on forever. 774's mechanical hands began to shake. But if I don't hate you, then what do I have left? My hatred is all that has kept me alive all these years. You could have friendship instead, Tommy suggested. Friends are way better than enemies. Friends help you feel better when you're sad, and they make you laugh when you're scared, and they think you're special even when you're different. Friendship, 774's voice cracked. With humans? After what they did to me? Not with all humans, Tommy said reasonably. Just with the good ones. And I promise there are lots of good ones. My mom and dad are good, and Captain Chin is good, and Dr. Martinez is good, even though he gets nervous sometimes. Sarah felt tears stinging her eyes as she watched this small boy trying to heal wounds that went far deeper than flesh and bone. I don't know how, 774 admitted, and now his voice was filled with a desperate longing rather than hatred. I don't remember how to trust, how to believe that someone might care about me without wanting something in return. Tommy thought about this seriously. Well, maybe we could start small. Like, I could tell you about my favorite things, and you could tell me about yours. And maybe you could tell me what it was like before the bad people hurt you. I bet you have lots of good stories from when you were a trader. For the first time since entering the room, something like hope flickered in 774's black eyes. I did see many wonders in my travels. Beautiful worlds, amazing creatures, kind people from dozens of species. See, Tommy clapped his hands together. You remember good things, too. The bad people couldn't take away all your good memories. 774 was quiet for a long moment, staring down at Tommy's earnest face. When he spoke again, his voice was completely different, softer, more uncertain, but also more genuinely alive than it had been since his arrival. My name, he said slowly, was Zaktar. I had not spoken it aloud in many years. Saktar, Tommy repeated cordially. That's a really cool name. I'm Tommy. Do you want to be friends, Zaktar? The being who had been called Designation 774 looked around the room at all the humans watching him. Sarah could see him struggling with years of pain and hatred, weighing it against the simple offer of friendship from an innocent child. I would like that, Zaktar said finally. But I don't know if I remember how to be a friend. That's okay, Tommy said cheerfully. We can learn together. My dad says that the best friendships are when people help each other grow. Ambassador Kithra stepped forward, and Sarah could see genuine emotion in the dragon's ancient eyes. In 800 years of conducting these trials, I have never seen anything like this. You have taken someone consumed by hatred and shown them a path to healing through simple compassion. It wasn't that hard, Tommy said modestly. Zaktar just needed someone to listen to him and care about his feelings. Everyone needs that sometimes. Kithra looked around at the assembled humans. Your species has passed all 3 trials, but more than that, you have taught me something I had forgotten. True strength is not the ability to destroy your enemies, but the wisdom to transform them into allies. Dr. Martinez found his voice. Does this mean? Yes, Kithra replied. Humanity has proven itself worthy of independence. You will be welcomed into the galactic community as an autonomous species. Cheers erupted from the human delegation, but Sarah noticed that Tommy wasn't celebrating. Instead, he was still standing next to Zaktar, holding the being's mechanical hand in both of his small ones. Zaktar, Tommy said seriously, what are you going to do now? Do you want to come visit Earth? We have really pretty oceans and mountains and stuff, and my mom makes the best chocolate chip cookies in the whole galaxy. Zaktar looked down at the boy, and Sarah was amazed to see what might have been the beginning of a smile on that scarred face. I would like that very much, Tommy. It has been many years since I tasted home-baked food. Cool. And maybe you could tell me more about all the places you've been. I want to be an explorer when I grow up, so I could use some advice from someone who's seen the whole galaxy. I would be honored to share my stories with you, Zaktar replied, and his voice held a warmth that seemed to transform his entire appearance. Ambassador Kithra watched this exchange with deep satisfaction. There is one more thing, the dragon announced. The Draconian Empire would like to propose a cultural exchange program. We believe that humanity, and particularly young humans like Tommy, could teach our species much about the arts of peace and diplomacy. And maybe we could learn some things from you too. Tommy said excitedly, like how to make friends with different kinds of people and how to be brave when things get scary. Indeed, Kithra agreed. Perhaps it is time for the galaxy to learn new definitions of strength and courage. Captain Sarah Chun felt a weight lifting from her shoulders that she hadn't even realized she was carrying. Humanity was safe, but more than that, they had found their place in the galactic community not through force or cunning, but through the simple power of compassion and understanding. Later that evening, as the celebration continued in the station's main recreation area, Sarah found herself on the observation deck once again. But this time, she wasn't alone. Ambassador Kithra stood beside her, both of them looking out at the stars. Ambassador, Sarah said, I have to ask, were these trials really tests, or were they something else entirely? Kithra was quiet for a moment before responding. Initially, they were meant to be tests, but your young Tommy taught me that the real question was not whether humanity deserved independence, but whether the galaxy was ready for what humanity could teach us. And what's that? That strength without compassion is merely brutality. That courage without wisdom is simply recklessness. And that intelligence without empathy is ultimately self-defeating. Sarah nodded, watching through the transparent walls as Tommy Henderson sat in a circle with Zaktar and several of the Draconian Honor Guard, apparently teaching them some sort of human children's game. The sight was both heartwarming and surreal. A small human boy surrounded by beings who had been bred for war, all of them laughing at something he had said. Your species has given us a gift, Kithra continued. You have reminded us that the purpose of civilization is not to create better ways of destroying our enemies, but better ways of making them into friends. Tommy will be pleased to hear that, Sarah replied. Though knowing him, he'd probably just say that making friends is easy. You just have to remember that everyone wants to feel important and cared about. Simple wisdom, Kithra observed. But perhaps that's what makes it so profound. Sometimes the most complex problems have the simplest solutions. As if sensing their conversation, Tommy looked up from his game and waved enthusiastically at them through the window. Beside him, Zaktar raised one of his mechanical hands in a hesitant but genuine wave of his own. Tomorrow, Kithra said, I will send a message to the Draconian High Council recommending that humanity be granted not just independence, but also a position on the Galactic Peace Commission. I believe your species has much to offer in resolving conflicts between other civilizations. And if I know Tommy, Sarah replied with a smile. He'll volunteer to help with that too. I would expect nothing less, Kitharis said, and Sarah was sure she heard laughter in the dragon's deep voice. The stars outside seemed brighter that night, full of possibilities that hadn't existed just 3 days before. Humanity had passed the trials, but, more importantly, they had opened a new chapter in galactic history, one where strength was measured not by the ability to conquer, but by the capacity to understand and forgive. And at the center of it all was a small boy who had looked at the most fearsome beings in the galaxy and seen not monsters to be afraid of, but friends waiting to be made. The trials were over, but the real adventure was just beginning. 6 months after the trials that changed everything, New Geneva Station had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a true center of interspecies cooperation. Captain Sarachan stood in what had once been a simple human outpost and marveled at how much had changed. The station now hosted beings from 17 different civilizations, all working together on projects that would have been unimaginable just a year ago. Draconian engineers worked alongside human scientists to develop new terraforming technologies. Hegemony traders like Zaktar shared navigation data that had been closely guarded secrets for centuries. Most remarkably of all, former enemies now sat together in the station's expanded cafeteria, sharing meals and stories. And at the center of it all was Tommy Henderson, who had somehow become the unofficial ambassador of friendship for the entire galaxy. Sarah found him that morning in his favorite place, the station's new interspecies cultural center, which had been built specifically to accommodate beings of all shapes and sizes. Tommy sat cross-legged on a cushion designed for humans, surrounded by a group that would have been impossible to imagine before the trials. There was Zaktar, whose mechanical arms had been replaced with far more sophisticated prosthetics that allowed him to gesture naturally as he spoke. The scarring on his face had begun to fade thanks to draconian medical technology, and, more importantly, the constant pain that had once defined his existence was finally gone. Beside Zaktar sat Guard Captain Vex, the massive blue-scale draconian who had become Tommy's first student in what the boy called protective friendship. The warrior's armor had been modified to be less intimidating and more ceremonial, reflecting their new role as head of the station's peacekeeping force. Ambassador Kithara was there too, though the Great Dragon now preferred to be called simply Kithara. The formal titles and ceremonies that had once defined their existence seemed less important now than the simple pleasure of listening to a human child's insights about life and friendship. The newest member of their circle was perhaps the most surprising of all, a being called Shrieks from a species known as the Void Hunters. The Void Hunters were notorious throughout the galaxy as the most aggressive and antisocial race ever discovered. They lived in the deep darkness between stars and had never been known to cooperate with any other species. Shrieks looked like a cross between a spider and a shadow, with multiple limbs and features that seemed to shift and blur in the light. Most beings found them deeply unsettling to look at, but Tommy had taken one look at the Void Hunter and declared them super cool, like a living constellation. So then what happened? Tommy was asking as Sarah approached the group. Shrieks' voice was like wind through a canyon, somehow both whisper quiet and perfectly audible. The Star Singers of Proxima 7 tried to make peace through their music. They believed that harmony in sound could create harmony in spirit. Did it work? Tommy asked eagerly. For a time, Shrieks replied, but music means different things to different species. What sounded like peace to the Star Singers sounded like a war cry to the crystal beings of Zirian Prime. Tommy frowned thoughtfully. So, they were trying to be friends, but they spoke different languages? In a way, yes. Communication is more than just words, little star friend. It includes tone, gesture, cultural context, even smell in some species. Sarah smiled at the way Shrieks had naturally adopted Tommy's habit of giving everyone affectionate nicknames. Starfriend had become the Void Hunter's special name for Tommy, though no one was quite sure what it meant in their culture. That's why we need places like this, Tommy said, gesturing around the cultural center, so everyone can learn how to talk to everyone else without accidentally starting fights. Kithra's great head nodded in agreement. Your idea of mandatory cultural exchange programs for all new species entering the galactic community has already prevented 3 potential wars, Tommy. It wasn't just my idea, Tommy protested. Everybody helped. Zaktar thought of the translation protocols, and Vex figured out the conflict resolution procedures, and Shrieks designed the cultural sensitivity training programs. Sarah marveled at how naturally Tommy gave credit to others while downplaying his own contributions. The boy had no idea that his simple suggestions had fundamentally changed how the galaxy approached diplomacy. Speaking of which, Sarah said, I have some news from Earth that I think you'll all want to hear. The group turned to face her with expectant expressions. Well, mostly expectant. It was hard to read expressions on Shrieks' shifting features, but their attention was clearly focused on Sarah. The United Earth government has officially established the Henderson Doctrine as the foundation for all future first contact protocols, Sarah announced. Tommy looked confused. What's the Henderson Doctrine? Zaktar leaned over and gently ruffled the boy's hair with his now sophisticated prosthetic hand. It's named after you, my young friend. It's the policy that all first contact situations should prioritize understanding and compassion over displays of strength or technological superiority. But that's just common sense, Tommy said, still looking puzzled. Why would anyone want to scare new friends instead of being nice to them? Because, Vex rumbled in their deep voice, for most of galactic history, species have assumed that showing strength was the best way to avoid conflict. Your approach of showing vulnerability and openness was revolutionary. Shrieks' shadowy form seemed to ripple with what might have been amusement. The little star friend has turned thousands of years of diplomatic tradition upside down, and he doesn't even realize it. I just try to be nice, Tommy said modestly. Mom and Dad always taught me to treat others the way I want to be treated. And that simple philosophy, Kithra observed, has already begun to transform the entire galaxy. The Draconian Empire has received over 300 requests from species wanting to join our new cooperative alliance. We're calling it the Compassionate Commonwealth. Sarah felt a surge of pride, not just for humanity, but for the remarkable boy who had somehow become the galaxy's most effective diplomat without even trying. There's more news, Sarah continued. The Galactic Council has approved funding for 50 new cultural centers like this one, to be built throughout known space. Each one will be staffed by graduates of our intercultural training program. That's wonderful. Tommy clapped his hands together. Think of all the new friends everyone will make. Indeed, Kithra said warmly. And speaking of new friends, we have some visitors arriving today that I think you'll find particularly interesting. As if on cue, the Cultural Center's main entrance opened to admit 3 beings unlike any Sarah had seen before. They were tall and graceful, with crystalline features that seemed to refract light in beautiful patterns. Their movements were fluid and synchronized, as if they were performing an elaborate dance. The Luminari, Kithra explained quietly. They're from the Andromeda Galaxy. This is their first visit to our galactic neighborhood. Tommy immediately bounced to his feet and walked toward the newcomers with his usual fearless curiosity. Hi, I'm Tommy. Welcome to New Geneva Station. The lead Luminari bent gracefully at what might have been their waist. Their anatomy was quite different from humanoid species. When they spoke, their voice was like the sound of crystal chimes in a gentle breeze. Greetings, young being. I am Resonance of Dawnlight. We have traveled far to learn about the transformation that has begun in this galaxy. Cool name, Tommy said enthusiastically. Are you made of crystal? You're really beautiful. Do you want to sit with us? We were just talking about how to be better friends with people who are different from us. Sarah watched as the Luminari exchanged rapid flashes of colored light, apparently their way of communicating with each other. After a moment, Resonance of Dawnlight straightened. We have heard stories of a small human who teaches wisdom to warriors and brings peace to ancient enemies. We did not believe such tales could be true. Oh, Tommy does way more than that, Zaktar interjected proudly. He helped me remember what it felt like to hope again. He taught Vex that protection doesn't require violence. He showed Kithra that strength and kindness can exist together. And he convinced Shrieks to join our community when no one else had ever even seen a void hunter away from their home territory. Tommy blushed at the praise. I didn't do all that by myself. Everyone helped everyone else. That's how friendship works. The second Luminari, who introduced themselves as Harmony of Stars Singing, moved closer to examine Tommy with obvious fascination. You radiate something we have never encountered before. A frequency of joy? Hope? We do not have words in any language we know. It's probably just because I'm happy, Tommy said with a grin. I love meeting new people and learning about how they live and what makes them special. The third Luminari, Echo of Ancient Wisdom, began to glow brighter as they spoke. In our galaxy, we have achieved great technological advancement, but we have never learned to cooperate across species boundaries. Each race remains isolated, suspicious of others. Perhaps this human child could teach us what we have been missing. Shrieks' form rippled with what Sarah had learned was their equivalent of laughter. Be warned, crystal singers. Once the star friend befriends you, your entire civilization will never be the same. He has a way of making you remember the best parts of yourself that you had forgotten. That sounds wonderful, Resonance of Dawnlight replied. Our people have grown cold and distant over the millennia. We have forgotten how to feel wonder at the beauty of other forms of life. Tommy looked around at all his friends, the scarred trader, the reformed warrior, the ancient diplomat, the shadow being, and now the crystal visitors from another galaxy entirely. You know what? I think we should have a party. A welcome party for our new friends. A party? Echo of Ancient Wisdom asked. What is this concept? It's when everyone gets together and has fun. Tommy explained. We can share food and music and stories, and everyone can teach everyone else something new. It's like friendship, but with decorations and cake. Vex rumbled with laughter. Tommy has introduced the concept of recreational gatherings to 17 different species. Half the galaxy now celebrates something called Friendship Day once a month. It sounds delightful, Harmony of Stars Singing said, their crystalline features brightening. We would be honored to participate in this party. As Tommy began enthusiastically planning the celebration, Sarah found herself standing beside Kithra, both of them watching the remarkable scene unfold. You know, Sarah said quietly, sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Tommy hadn't been here during the trials. Would we have found another way to prove ourselves? Kithra was quiet for a moment, considering. I believe your species would have eventually found a path to acceptance. But it might have taken decades, or even centuries. Tommy accelerated a transformation that was perhaps inevitable, but he also guided it in a direction that no one could have predicted. How so? Before Tommy, the galaxy was organized around the principle of dominance. Who was strongest? Who could conquer whom? Who deserved to rule? Now we're beginning to organize around the principle of cooperation. Who can help whom? Who can learn from whom? Who can grow together? Sarah nodded, understanding. He's changed the fundamental question. Exactly. Instead of asking, how can we defeat our enemies? We're now asking, how can we turn our enemies into friends? It seems like a small change, but it's revolutionizing everything. As if hearing his name, Tommy looked over at them and waved. Kithra, Captain Chun, come help us plan the party. The Luminari want to know if we can make music with light instead of just sound, and Shrieks thinks they can make decorations out of shadows, and Zaktar knows where to get the best ice cream in the galaxy. Sarah and Kithra exchanged amused glances before joining the planning session. As they approached, Sarah could hear the Luminari asking earnest questions about the proper etiquette for recreational gatherings, while Shrieks was apparently trying to explain the concept of fun to beings who had never experienced it before. You see, Tommy was saying patiently, the most important rule is that there are no rules. Just be yourself and try to make everyone else feel happy and welcome. If someone looks left out, invite them to join in. If someone seems sad, ask them if they're okay. And if someone doesn't understand something, help them figure it out. These principles apply to more than just parties. Resonance of Dawnlight observed. They could transform how our entire galaxy interacts. That's the idea. Tommy said cheerfully. If everyone just tried to be nice to everyone else, we could all be friends instead of enemies. It's not that hard once you get the hang of it. Sarah settled down to help with the party planning, but her mind was on the larger implications of what she was witnessing. In less than a year, Tommy's simple philosophy of kindness had begun to spread throughout the galaxy like ripples from a stone thrown into a pond. Species that had been enemies for millennia were learning to work together. Ancient conflicts were being resolved through dialogue instead of warfare. Trade and cultural exchange were flourishing like never before. And it had all started with one small boy who looked at a fearsome alien dragon and said, "You're really pretty." Sometimes, Sarah reflected, the most profound changes began with the smallest gestures. Sometimes all it took to change the galaxy was one person willing to see others not as threats to be defeated, but as friends waiting to be made. The party planning continued around her, filled with laughter and excited conversation in a dozen different languages. Outside the windows, she could see ships from numerous species docked at the station, not as conquerors or rivals, but as visitors and partners in the greatest adventure the galaxy had ever known. The age of fear and isolation was ending. The age of friendship and cooperation had begun. And at its heart was a boy who had never stopped believing that everyone, no matter how different or frightening they might seem, was just another potential friend. 1 year after the trials that changed the galaxy, New Geneva Station was preparing for its most important event yet, the first Intergalactic Peace Summit. Representatives from over 100 species were gathering to formalize the new age of cooperation that had begun with a small boy's simple act of kindness. Captain Sarah Chun stood in the station's new Grand Assembly Hall, watching the final preparations with a mixture of pride and amazement. The hall had been designed to accommodate beings of all sizes and environmental needs, with sections for aquatic species, high-gravity dwellers, energy beings, and even the void hunters who preferred darkness to light. At the center of it all was a special platform where the official ceremonies would take place. Tomorrow, the compassionate Commonwealth would be formally established, replacing the old system of empires and dominions with something unprecedented, a truly voluntary association of worlds based on mutual respect and cooperation. But today, there was a more personal celebration taking place. Tommy Henderson was turning 9 years old, and somehow his birthday party had become the unofficial opening ceremony for the Peace Summit. Representatives who had traveled from across multiple galaxies were gathering not for formal negotiations, but to celebrate the boy who had made their cooperation possible. Sarah found Tommy in the Cultural Center, surrounded by friends whose diversity would have been unimaginable just 2 years ago. The guest list read like a catalog of every known sentient species in local space. Kithara was there, of course, along with Guard Captain Vex and the other Draconians who had become regular visitors to the station. Zaktar sat nearby, his prosthetic arms now so sophisticated that they were barely distinguishable from organic limbs. The Luminari from Andromeda Galaxy had returned, bringing gifts of crystalline music that filled the air with harmonious chimes. Shrieks lurked in their preferred shadows, but their forms seemed brighter and more substantial than when they first arrived. Sarah had learned that void hunters actually became more visible when they were happy, though this was apparently the first time in their species' history that anyone had observed the phenomenon. The newest arrivals were perhaps the most remarkable yet. The collective of Zirian Prime had sent a representative, a hive mind species that had never before acknowledged individual beings as worthy of interaction. The being called itself Echo of Many Thoughts and communicated through patterns of colored light that shifted across its crystalline surface. There were also the Dreamweavers, ethereal beings who existed partially outside normal space-time, the mechanical forge minds who had built the galaxy's most advanced artificial intelligences, and even a representative from mysterious watchers who observed galactic events, but never interfered. All of them had come to celebrate the birthday of one small human boy. Tommy, Sarah called as she approached the group. Happy birthday. Tommy looked up from where he was showing Echo of Many Thoughts how to play a simple human card game. The hive mind being was apparently finding the concept of individual decision-making fascinating. Captain Chun. Tommy jumped up and hugged her enthusiastically. Did you see all my friends? This is the best birthday ever. I can see that, Sarah laughed. It looks like half the galaxy showed up for your party. Not half, Kithara corrected with gentle amusement. Based on the guest list, approximately 67% of all known civilizations are represented here today. That's so cool, Tommy said. I can't wait to meet everyone and hear about their worlds. Echo of Many Thoughts pulsed with patterns of blue and gold light. When they spoke, their voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. The child who unites speaks truly. We who are many have observed this gathering with great interest. Never have so many diverse forms of consciousness gathered in peaceful assembly. It's because Tommy makes everyone feel welcome, Zaktar said proudly. He has a gift for seeing the best in people, even when they can't see it in themselves. One of the Dreamweavers drifted closer, their translucent form shimmering in and out of visibility. The child's dreams resonate across dimensional boundaries. We have observed the ripples of hope spreading throughout space-time itself. What kind of ripples? Tommy asked with genuine curiosity. Peace dreams where there were once war nightmares, the Dreamweaver replied. Hope visions where there was once despair. Your simple wish for friendship has become a force that transcends normal reality. Sarah felt a chill of wonder. She had suspected that Tommy's influence was somehow greater than it appeared, but to hear it confirmed by beings who could actually perceive such things was both thrilling and humbling. Speaking of gifts, Vex rumbled, stepping forward with something large wrapped in shimmering cloth. The Draconian Empire has prepared something special for your birthday. Tommy's eyes widened as Vex carefully unveiled a magnificent sculpture. It was carved from a single piece of crystal that seemed to contain captured starlight, depicting Tommy surrounded by representatives of dozens of different species, all of them reaching toward each other in gestures of friendship. It's beautiful, Tommy breathed. But why am I in the middle? Because that's where you belong, Kithara said simply. At the center of the web of friendship that now connects the galaxy. The Luminari stepped forward next, their crystalline forms chiming in harmony. We too have brought a gift, Resonance of Dawnlight announced. Behold, the Song of Unity. They began to sing, and the sound was unlike anything Sarah had ever heard. It wasn't just music, but somehow a translation of emotion into pure sound. Every being present seemed to hear something different in the melody, something that spoke to their deepest nature, yet all the individual experiences wove together into a perfect whole. Tommy listened with tears of joy running down his face. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard, he whispered when the song ended. The song will be played at tomorrow's Peace Summit, Harmony of Stars Singing explained. It will serve as the official anthem of the compassionate Commonwealth. But the greatest gift, Shriek said, their shadow form rippling with amusement, is the one the star friend doesn't know about yet. Tommy looked around curiously. What do you mean? It was Dr. Robert Henderson who stepped forward to explain, his face beaming with pride. Tommy, the Galactic Council has made a decision. They want to create a new position, Ambassador of Universal Friendship. It will be someone whose job is to help solve conflicts and bring different species together. That sounds like a really important job, Tommy said thoughtfully. Who are they going to choose? Dr. Lisa Henderson laughed. Sweetie, they've chosen you. If you want it, of course. You'd be the youngest ambassador in galactic history. Tommy's mouth fell open in surprise. Me? But I'm just a kid. I don't know anything about being an ambassador. You know the most important thing, Kithra said gently. You know how to see others as friends instead of enemies. You know how to listen with your heart as well as your ears. And you know that every being, no matter how different or frightening they might seem, has something valuable to offer. Besides, Zaktar added with a grin, you've already been doing the job for a year. We're just making it official. Tommy was quiet for a moment, thinking seriously about the offer. Sarah could see him weighing the responsibility against his genuine desire to help others. Will I still get to live with Mom and Dad? He asked finally. Of course, Dr. Robert Henderson assured him. The whole family would be stationed here on New Geneva Station, which is becoming the official headquarters for intergalactic diplomacy. And would I still get to have friends and play games and stuff? Tommy, echo of many thoughts pulsed with gentle colors. Your friendship and play are the foundation of your diplomatic success. We who are many would be greatly concerned if you were to become too serious and adult-like. Yeah, one of the Forge minds added in their mechanical voice. Our analysis indicates that your effectiveness is directly proportional to your continued authenticity as a human child. Tommy brightened. Okay then, I'd love to be the ambassador of Universal.